What we're going to talk about is we're going to be discussing, and it really just comes from all the years. I've been interviewing people for 3 years, and I want to be able to compress all their knowledge, share that with all of you in a way that you can even share with your kids. Because I'm thinking about, hey, how do I leave this knowledge for all of our children? And when we think about mastering something, you have to understand how to teach it in order to master it. That's the best way to master something. So, oh, one second, let me plug in my battery. I want to run out of batteries. And so, what I've been doing is I've been studying all the content for a realtor's license and one of the legal aspects of real estate stuff. One chapter here. Yesterday we talked about how ownership is held. How do you hold title? Today we're going to talk about how that ownership is acquired or conveyed or transferred. And this is going to be important because you have to understand, hey, how do people come to own property in the first place? And how do they pass it on when they're ready? Right? All that stuff matters. Let me turn on my chat. Great. And we're going to explore buying, gifting, inheriting, and more. All that stuff, right? Because by the end, I really want you to understand how ownership changes hands. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're buying or selling or just planning for the future, this is going to be good. And I'm going to come up with some analogies that even a 10-year-old can understand. And again, I'm just testing this, right? I'm not claiming to be an expert. And if you have any better analogies that you can share with me so that I can share that with my kids, I would really appreciate it. I'm just trying to be a better dad. And sometimes learning how to explain things in a way that your kids can understand can be the most challenging problem. But that's why we are all in this together. All right. So let's talk first. Let's talk about acquiring ownership. All right. Ownership can happen in a couple of ways, right? You can purchase a home, you can receive one as a gift, you can inherit a place from a relative, aunt, uncle, doesn't matter what it is, or sometimes you can claim it if it's abandoned. I think of it as for a kid, right? Trading cards. In my age, it was Pokemon cards, and Pokemon cards are still around. That's wild to me. But you can buy them, you can trade them, you swap them with friends, right? You can get them as a present, or you can even sometimes find a lost card that someone dropped on the floor, right? So this is the same thing for real estate. Real estate has its own way. Okay. So let's talk about voluntary transfers. When you buy or sell a property, you typically use a written document called a deed, and it spells out who's giving up ownership, who's receiving it, and usually it has a description of the property. I think of it as writing a formal note saying, hey, I am transferring my interest in this house to you. And here's what includes, right? Here's the date we agreed on, right? That note, when it's properly signed and passed along, that's really central. That's really important to a real estate deal. And if you're giving property as a gift, right, the deed can reflect that too. Just be aware that in many places, when you gift property, there are typically tax consequences. So you got to make sure you ask your CPA. This is not investment advice. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. I'm not soliciting any investments on this call. I just want to make sure that you can get the right advice from your own counsel. Okay. So let's talk about involuntary transfers when it's not your choice. Why might that happen? Sometimes property moves from one owner to another, even if the owner isn't on board, right? One of the most common scenarios is called foreclosure, right? That's when the owner can't keep up with the mortgage payments. The lender can either take back the house and sell it to recover as much of the proceeds as possible for what they were owed, right? You borrow money to buy the home. When you can't pay that mortgage anymore, sellers to take your home, sell it back so they can take back and recoup as much money as possible of what they lent out. Another example we talked about is eminent domain. And that's where the government can take private land from somebody to build something usually deemed important for the public. This could be a highway, And usually, if they do that, they have to pay you a fair amount for that piece of land. Now, how do you explain this to kid, right? Screen time, that's a good one. Imagine your parents let you borrow an iPad if you promise to do your chores. But if you stop doing the chores, they can take the tablet away, lock it in a cabinet, give it to another sibling. You didn't choose to give back that iPad, right? But you lost it because you didn't follow that agreement. And that's sort of how a lender or the government can claim property, right? If you don't pay your property taxes, the government can claim the property as well, especially if the owner can't meet their obligations. It's very, very important. So, next up, let's talk a little bit about wills, estates, how property gets passed on. Because when someone writes a will, they're essentially telling the whole world who should get their stuff, including their house, after they pass away. And if they don't leave a will, right, then you leave it up to local laws. And that's the whole probate process that decides which relative would inherit what. It's really messy, it's really complicated. So I would highly advise you, if you own property, you do some advanced planning. The last thing you want to do when your family is grieving is for them to have to take care of your affairs and try to understand exactly what your wishes are. It's really hard. So really put some thought into it, okay? I mean, think of it as your grandparent. If they labeled all the boxes of their stuff in their garage before they pass away with each grandchild's name, then they know what to do with it, right? But if they never labeled them, then you have to go in there and try and figure out how to divvy all the stuff up, how to split all the stuff up. And that can be really, really hard, right? Sometimes people might put their property into a trust, right? So during their lifetime, they keep control, but once it passes, it goes to the person named in the trust without going through a complicated court process, okay? It's, it's almost like you leave your special trading card collection in a secured box, and there are instructions that says like, hey, it goes to cousin A or uncle A or auntie B when you're gone. That's what you want to do. That's a level of clarity that you want to provide to somebody. Okay. Let's talk about adverse possession. And adverse possession is typically when someone else's land, if someone uses someone else's land openly for a long time, right? They pay taxes on it. I mean, they can become the new owner if all those legal requirements are met. It's almost as if your neighbor plants a garden on a strip of your backyard for years, thinking it's theirs, and you never stop them. They might be able to claim that piece of your backyard. So just be really careful of that, okay? Now, let's talk about public recording. This is the paper trail. This is why it's so important. If a property changes hands, it's usually recorded with a local government office. This makes the transfer public, so everyone can see who currently owns the place. I think of it as posting a note on a community board and saying, hey, FYI, as of today, this house belongs to me. And when you record this, right, it helps avoid fraud, it helps avoid confusion in the future. Very, very important. So this is why all matters. I think you really want to understand, hey, if you're planning a sale or you're trying to gift a property, or you're curious about how other people buy all this property that you hear about through foreclosures, etc., right? You got to understand these methods because each route, right, whether you're buying or gifting or inheriting, they got their own rules. So it's good for you to pick what fits your plans, and you got to keep great, great documentation. That's the best way to go about it. So we covered a lot of ways, and I hope you found this helpful. My goal with all this is to find good examples, good analogies that we can use to explain these concepts and piecemeal ideas. If you have better analogies, drop it in the comments on how to explain all these things better, because this stuff is really, really important to me. I am trying to become a better dad by learning and giving great examples so that my kids can understand. There's no need to make this stuff so complicated so that other people don't understand it. I'm just learning to get better every single day, and I can't thank you enough for being on this journey with me. We've been going live for 538 days. I know I'm switching it up on you guys a little bit by not underwriting every single day, but I like to think that you have to evolve to become a different version of yourself. And having underwritten deals for over 500 days now, it was refreshing to change it up a little bit, because if you still want to look at any of our underwriting rules, just go to our live stream on youtube.com/ at Kent_HE and give me some feedback. Give me some questions. I'm really, really interested to hear your feedback. This stuff is easy, but this stuff can get lonely. So shoot me a DM. This stuff is useful for you as you're learning how to explain these things. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for caring about affordable housing. Without people like you, I would never have the home I grew up in. So I appreciate you all so much. Thank you. Have an amazing Thursday. I hope you spend some quality time with your family and friends today, because that's what life is all about. And you don't appreciate how much time you have with your family until you don't have it. So don't let it be too late. Hopefully, this was helpful today on how we covered ownership, how it's acquired, how it's conveyed. And you ever want to watch a replay of it, just go back to youtube.com/ at Kent_HE. You can watch a whole replay and watch how I come out with these silly analogies about using Pokemon cards to explain real estate. All right. Have a good one. I'll see you all tomorrow for day 539. Have a good one. Can't hear.